Welcome back to Sweet Sycamore Devotions. I'm Nicole. We have been in our Among the 12 series. We have had so much fun this season, and this is actually our last devotion until we take a break for summer. I say we all the time. You guys, it's just me. I don't know, maybe I have multiple personalities over here, but yeah, I'm going to take a break this summer and be posting a lot on Instagram, but it has been so fun to walk through the disciples. We have gone through all 12. We have kind of talked about their calling, how they started following Jesus, a little bit about their life, and then we started going through the Gospels in a chronological setting as far as overlay of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and just kind of walking through what they would have experienced. And I hope to continue in September and just keep walking this path with them. But where we left off in our last devotion was we were in Nazareth, where Jesus went to his hometown and he took his disciples. And I'm sure there was this excitement, like he's going home. Like, how cool is this going to be? They're going to be so excited to see him, but that is not the reaction. At first they were excited as he started teaching in the synagogue, but then he started talking about how he was there not just to save the Jews, but he was there for the Gentiles too. And they weren't okay with that. They actually got very, very angry. And we're not talking like a small amount of anger. We're talking like, I want to murder you kind of anger. And I'm sure this probably had to catch the disciples off guard because they're probably like, wow, this is the first big crowd that Jesus is walking into. And they want to kill him. Now, the reason they wanted to kill him was because Jesus was really going after this pocket of pride. The Jews believed that they were God's chosen people. And although that part was true, it created this pocket of pride in their heart where they now believed that they were better than anybody else. And that is not the part that Jesus was, telling them. He's like, hey, I have come for the Gentiles. I have come for all people. I have not come just for you. And that made them furious. But then he also tells them that they're not going to be willing to receive him and receive the miracles and believe who he is because they don't have enough faith. And I would think that they would be like, wow, I need to have a heart of repentance. Like, if this is really the case, like, change me, Lord. But that was the opposite of where they were going, and they wanted to kill him instead of having a heart of repentance. And the disciples had to see this. Now, the disciples were all Jewish men, which means they understood this concept of the Jews believing that they were better than the Gentiles, believing that because they were God's chosen people, that they were kind of elite. And so they would have understood why this group of people, which was part of their group of people, was so angry. This was something that was kind of ingrained in them at a young age. So they would have understood. And then looking at this and going, wow, what did they have to think when they tried to kill him? And obviously the disciples weren't trying to kill Jesus and they weren't part of this crowd. However, they could have understood where it came from. But also really gathering that this is before Jesus has done any miracles. Yes, Jesus is coming and he's teaching in the synagogue, but the only miracle that we know has already taken place is the water to wine. And when we read that miracle in John 2, it really hints that it was a very intimate miracle that perhaps the disciples themselves knew, and obviously Mary knew, but very, very few people knew. This was not a public display miracle. It was a very intimate gathering of those that could see the miracle. And even that, it wasn't changing somebody's life. It was just water to wine. But we don't have the massive miracles that we will see later on in Jesus's ministry. So again, I have to ask this question, like, how many of us, if we were among the 12 disciples, would have not made it out of Nazareth? How many of us would have been like, wow, is this what the reaction is going to be like to Jesus if I want to follow him? Because it wasn't like they were just buddies or hanging out with Jesus. They were the disciples to Jesus, who was their rabbi. What does that mean? You see, a rabbi had disciples that would follow him, but the fate of the rabbi was the fate of the disciples because the disciples were literally there to become like the rabbi. If a rabbi was to be killed, the disciples would have been killed. So this isn't some like lighthearted, let me follow you for fun type thing. So when they see for the first time right out of the gate that people are trying to kill Jesus, this isn't a lighthearted decision for them to follow him out of Nazareth. Again, the question, how many of us wouldn't make it out of Nazareth? How many of us would be like, whoa, if this is what it's going to be like to follow him, I don't know if that's in my cards. Like, I don't know. And how many of us happens like that? Like, we tell people that we've given our life over to the Lord, and the reaction is like them straight up coming at us, telling us we're crazy, and we start to believe it and start to question, and we start thinking, this is not supposed to be this hard. and we give up and we stay in Nazareth. Because Jesus, when they tried to throw him off the cliff and he passed right through, he left with his 12 disciples and he went to Capernaum. If they would have stayed in Nazareth, they would have not had the experience that they got to see firsthand in Capernaum. Because here's what happens. Jesus goes to Capernaum, and it says that he goes to the synagogue and he starts teaching many Sabbaths in a row. Now, I want to stop there because I find this interesting. He goes and he teaches in the synagogue, and we see that he did that also in Nazareth. And he didn't go and start doing miracles. He didn't start showing up and be like, let me show you all these things. He goes and he teaches. Now, why? In the scriptures, Jesus is very consistent in the fact that he isn't there for a miracle-based faith. He is there for a relationship, transformational type of faith. Therefore, that kind of relationship that actually transforms us from the inside out comes from us knowing God and knowing his word. And that's why Jesus spends so much time in the synagogue. It's so important that these people just not get what they want out of him, but they are there for the actual transformation that's going to take place from the inside out in their lives. And that is why that he shows up and he is teaching them before he goes and does a miracle. Are you in it for the relationship, or are you in it for the transaction? And Jesus will always put more emphasis on the relationship than he will this miracle-based transactional type of faith that can exist. And I will be honest with you, I love a good miracle. I love a good miracle. And I have experienced some crazy miracles in my life. I have been in countries where I have laid my hand on somebody's tumor that was the size of a baseball, and I have felt it go down to the size of a golf ball. I mean, and this person, I don't know if they knew Jesus or not. There was a language barrier between us, but I have experienced some crazy miracles in my life. However, it has not been the miracles that have got me through my hardest times. It has been the relationship. It has been this intimacy that I have with the Lord that has sustained me. And I believe that it's because of that relationship that got the disciples to leave Nazareth and go to Capernaum. Jesus had a relationship. He had called these disciples prior to leaving, prior to even going into Nazareth. And therefore that relationship sustained them even through that hard time to get them to leave and go with him to Capernaum. How many of us stay stuck in Nazareth? They would have missed the miracles, because right after that, after he spends all this time teaching on the Sabbath, we see that a man comes in and he is possessed by a demon, and Jesus does his first casting out of a demon. And then it says that he goes to Peter's house after that, and Peter's mother-in-law is sick, and he actually heals her. And we see by the end of the day, okay, this is happening so fast now that everybody is bringing their sick, their demon-possessed, and it literally says in the scriptures that every single person is healed. Every single person, which just would be amazing to see. And then it says that he is spreading, people are running from town to town and talking all about Jesus. This is the moment Jesus goes viral. But you would have missed it if you stayed in Nazareth. How many of us get stuck in the hard and we miss the miracles in the next city because we're still sitting in Nazareth? The disciples stayed on the heels of Jesus. They did not miss the miracles. In fact, Peter himself got to kind of be a recipient as his own mother-in-law was healed. And I kind of want to pull out some things for us just to cling to so that we can make sure that we don't get stuck in Nazareth. And the first thing is this: we need to cling to the calling. The disciples, every single one of them, were called by Jesus to be in relationship with him, to be walking beside him. You, my friend, you're called too. And sometimes we need to remember that we are called, because calling does not mean that life is going to be great. I mean, don't you think if Jesus is calling you into something, it should be grand? Except a lot of times Jesus is actually calling us to something that is hard. And we need to remember that we are not there because we took a wrong turn or because we're just in the place we're not supposed to be. Sometimes we are in the hard because that is where Jesus actually wants us, where his glory is on display in our life. And we need to remember that calling. The Israelites, they would build these stone pillars, and they needed that because they needed to be reminded that they were called to be there. Sometimes we need this physical thing to remind us, I'm supposed to be here, even though it's hard. But another thing I want you to cling to is really to cling to the relationship. Yes, we want the miracles. We want that transaction, but that is not what is going to get us through. It's the relationship. Cling to the relationship, not the transaction. When you are trying to remember, like, I got to make it out of Nazareth and I got to get to Capernaum. There's a verse, it's Isaiah 43:19, where God tells the Israelite people, he says, see, I am doing a new thing. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness. I'm going to create streams in the wasteland. And when I hear that verse, I'm like, no, no, I don't perceive it. Like, it's really hard for me to perceive what God is doing because I often don't see it. Why? Because I'm outside my house in my country road and I'm staring at the pothole and I'm like, Lord, I need a healing right here. This is the transaction that I need taken care of because I am hitting this thing over and over and over. And I'm staring at this thing so much that I am missing that God is making this entire interstate bypass system like around that pothole so that I don't even have to deal with it anymore. And that's where it's talking about this idea, like if I can take myself out of that situation, stop looking at the transaction that I need and start looking at the relationship, I will be able to perceive the new things that God is doing easier. Perceive the new things by focusing on the relationship, not just the transaction that you need him to do. The disciples, they spent like this intimate time with Jesus. So much so that that relationship is what carried them through. That relationship is what got them taking one step in front of each other on the heels of Jesus as he left Nazareth. They trusted him. They really did. The last thing I will leave you with is to cling to the God sightings. I'm reminded of Moses, and there was this moment when Moses had just seen the burning bush, but yet God was still calling him to something that was really scary. And he knew people were going to be at him. I mean, people were already at him. That's why he was in the wilderness in the first place, because people were going to come at him because he had killed a man when he was in Egypt. And yet he had seen the burning bush, and yet Moses cries, God, show me your glory. And I sit there because I want the God sightings. And I think some of us just need to have that cry of, God, show me your glory. I need more. I need to see your fingertips. I need to see your fingerprints. I need to have these God sightings. Even if it's just like this glimpse, I will keep running and I will keep stepping. I just need to see a tidbit of your glory. The beautiful part about that is God does. He does show us a little bit more of his glory the moment that we cry out that we need it. When I talk about clinging to the calling and clinging to the relationship and clinging to these God sighting moments, like I'm not talking about like kind of lightly grabbing a hold of it. I'm talking about like a toddler who just grabbed a French fry they weren't supposed to have. Have you ever seen that kind of grip? I mean, you like try to pry the fingertips off of it and you can't. Like the moment you get one finger off, it's like the next one's like back on it. Like it is so incredibly hard to fight a toddler for a French fry. And that's the kind of clinging I am talking about. Like I am going to wrestle with this, Lord. Like I may not really believe this yet, but I'm going to hold on to it until I do. I am clinging onto you and I'm choosing to walk out of Nazareth, as hard and scary as that was, because I am praying that I will be walking into Capernaum and I will see the miracles on the other side. See, the distance from Nazareth to Capernaum is roughly 40 miles, about 80,000 steps. 80,000 steps. And today this trail is actually called the Jesus Trail. Could you walk 80,000 steps, not leaning on physical miracles that you have seen, but strictly in a relationship with Jesus, having no idea what you are walking into? They did. They did. They left Nazareth and they walked into Capernaum and they got to see the glory of God on display for all to see. Has your relationship with Jesus carried you through some moments that maybe you did not see the physical miracles, but because you stayed faithful, you did. You finally got to see the new things that God was doing. The disciples stayed on Jesus' heel. I mean, they didn't even linger. They didn't even stay 50 steps back just in case they wanted to kill him in Capernaum too. No, they were right with Jesus. Why? Because here's the real kicker. The relationship was worth it, even having no idea what awaited them in Capernaum. Because on the Jesus trail, the beautiful thing is you don't walk it alone. You walk it with so many other Christians who are there beside you. Some of us are 1,000 steps in, some of us are 2 steps in, some of us are 78,000 steps in, but you are not alone. But here's the beautiful thing. You are not walking it alone, more importantly, because Jesus is walking it with you. Yes, you will go through valleys. Yes, every step will probably be exhausting, having no idea what he is walking you into, but you do not walk it alone. He walks right beside you. But that means that we're going to have a lot of steps ahead of us that we have no idea what we are walking into. And we may even have walked out of some scary situations. We have no idea what God is doing. He does not give us a playbook, but each and every step is leading us closer to where he wants us to be. And I know for me, I do not want to miss the miracles ahead because I am too afraid of what I am experiencing right now. Keep taking that step forward because, my friends, we're on the Jesus trail and we don't walk it alone. I, for one, am really glad that you're with me on this Jesus trail and that God gives us each other just to encourage each other, to inspire each other, to push each other a little bit closer to Jesus and what he is doing in our life. And it is such an honor for me to walk it alongside with you. So I encourage you, wherever you're at, you're not alone. Keep taking steps. Don't get stuck in Nazareth and keep looking for the Lord. Keep clinging to that relationship. And remember that just because you are called does not mean it will always be easy. This wraps up what we have for this season in our Among the 12 series, but we will be back continuing on with our Among the 12 in September, and we're going to keep walking through the Gospels chronologically with the disciples and putting ourselves in their shoes and what it would be like to walk on the heels of Jesus. Until then, I'll be posting a lot on Instagram, so you're welcome to join me over there this summer. It's in Vicky, and I will see you guys in September if I don't see you before.